when we're weeding through those applicants, try to keep our company mission and values in mind first and foremost. Background and skills come after that, but we can teach that job role. Those
Okay.
skills can be taught to people, but their values and somebody who believes in our mission, we really want to focus on that.
This is Lead with Culture. I'm Kate Volman, and on this episode, I actually turned the hosting reins over to Tony Ferraro, who is our director of coaching. You've probably heard on previous episodes, and he was joined by HR professional Mitzi Dain to find out how they're hiring great people. So what's interesting is Mitzi is a veteran HR professional. She is at the Panhandle Telephone Cooperative. And they're using a lot of the principles from The Culture Solution, which is one of Matthew Kelly's books. And specifically, they dug into principle number 4, which is hire with rigorous discipline. The interesting thing about Mitzi and where she is that while so many leaders are out there struggling to find really talented people to even apply for their roles, she has a lot of really great candidates applying for the roles over at her organization. And so what she's tasked with is taking that pool of people and finding those A players. And so that's really what they dug into, talking about the hiring process, what they do to attract really great people, what they do during the hiring process to make sure that they are hiring the right people, because every leader we talk to, hiring is one of the biggest challenges that come up over and over again. Being able to find the right people, get those people in your organization, and make sure that they are thriving so that they stay. And so that's what the Culture Solution is all about. So that's what this conversation is about, hiring. It's a great topic. They dig into some really interesting things. I hope you get a lot out of this value. So here we go. I'll turn it right on over. Enjoy the episode.
All right, great. Hey, today we're talking with Mitzi Dain, Mitzi, you are the Director of Human Resources. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. So at PTCI, what a great company. So thank you, first of all, for agreeing to talk today. I really appreciate it. And if you would, tell us just a little bit about PTCI, what it stands for, where you are, what problems you solve for people, and anything else you think is relevant. Tell us about that.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. I'm
Sure.
excited to visit with you. Well, PTCI is a telephone cooperative. We serve a large rural area that stretches from Kenton, New Mexico to Laverne, Oklahoma, and down into the Texas Panhandle. So it's a large area with a lot of people, but not a lot of people
Yeah.
in that area. So we serve our customers with POTS, which is plain old telephone service, broadband services, so Wi-Fi, internet, those kinds of things for homes and also for businesses. In addition, we have a cellular system. A lot going on here.
Yeah. So I've actually been to your place and driven up to it, and that's a lot of area, sometimes in the middle of not a lot. So
Yes.
I'm sure those challenges abound from there. And it is a cooperative, which has that extra part of where the people who you serve also own the company, right?
That's exactly right.
Fantastic. So you've been in HR for a minute. Tell us about your experience both in HR and then how long you've been at PTCI and a little bit about that experience.
Okay. Yes, it has been a hot minute for sure. I've actually worked here at PTCI for 30 years. 29 of those years have been in HR. Before that, I didn't have any HR experience, had a lot of retail experience, that kind of thing, but no HR experience as such. I came on here as a receptionist and quickly moved into a cashier's role. And then just almost immediately after getting trained for that, moved into HR, into a benefits representative role. Served in that
Gotcha.
role for close to a year, probably.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden they found a need for an HR director and I jumped into that role and that's where I've been ever since.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been great.
Okay. Yeah. I find that particularly companies, they either grow into needing an HR person or something comes up and that's when they decide they need an HR person.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was one of those two. So I know this, it's a great place to work. You're in a unique experience, or at least a unique situation from what I see a lot is that you have a lot of people that want to work for you. It's really positioned as a great position. Your benefits are outstanding. The work is great. I can say from being there, the climate is wonderful. People treating each other with respect. And you actually, a lot of our folks are struggling with finding people and sourcing people. Your problem's a little unique in that you tend to have a good number of people applying for open positions. Is that correct?
That is correct. A ton of applicants.
Okay.
It's not unusual for us for kind of our clerical or office type positions. Now, our more technical positions, there's not quite as many, but we have one open right now in our central office. And I was just noticing before we came on here that the applicants are popping up right and left.
Yeah, there's a lot of HR people envious right now that are listening to this, I'm sure. However, like everything else, it creates its own challenges, right? You've got a big pool. You got to find out which one of those people makes the most sense. So I'm assuming that's one of your challenges, but why don't you speak to that and some other challenges that you face in the hiring process?
So when we're weeding through those applicants, try to keep our company mission and values in mind first and foremost. Background and skills come after that, but we can teach that job role. Those
Okay.
skills can be taught to people, but their values and somebody who believes in our mission, we really want to focus on that. So that kind of comes first for us. So that's a challenge in working through those applications and thinking through, hey, how does what I see here fit into that? Just based on the paper aspect of it. So that's the first thing, is weeding through all
Okay.
of that. We can't force them to fit into our culture. So we want to be sure that we're looking for that as we do it. Each application is given thought and consideration. I have a fear of setting aside that person that would have been perfect
Yeah,
for the role. So I'm
absolutely.
very careful to give each application thought and consideration. Once those applicants have been narrowed down to a manageable number, then we do a testing and interviewing process. So we have a series of tests that's very specific to each job role. Every time we post a role, we look at the job role first, make sure everything is as it should be, make any changes needed, and then set up a series of tests for that role. So that's
Yeah.
a challenge, is making sure that we're doing the right testing for
Yeah.
that specific role and
Okay.
that it tells us what we need to know about their skills and abilities. Once those tests are complete, we may narrow the applicants more from that based on the testing. Everybody
Okay.
may test really well, and we say, okay, this is our pool. Let's interview from here. We
Yeah.
try to narrow it if we need to. Then the interview process is very background and culture centered.
Okay.
So trying to pull those things out of people. So those are some of the
Sure.
steps that we take.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on something there of really having a good idea and knowing what those qualities of a person that they need to have to fit into the culture. And that we believe, at least, you can break that down into some qualities that fit across the organization, whether you're talking about a Pullman or a customer service rep or whoever that might be. I know we talked about that in the training. I just want to speak to that a little bit. So my impression was that you were doing hiring pretty well when we got there. We have had some conversations that maybe there's some things that you were able to implement. Can you speak to that a little bit, where there's just some insights maybe that you gathered that you've been able to implement that have been impactful?
Absolutely. So we started focusing more on the culture and more on the background of employees. We didn't really do that before. Prior to that, we gave limited thought to their background, focused more on skills. Like we talked about, you can teach even the most novice employee those skills. It's that person that wants to be in your culture and believes in what you believe in and that kind of thing. So that's a lot of what we learned from our training. Helped us narrow the process down to that, to begin looking more towards those types of things.
Okay. Yeah. And then some consistency across the organization of trying to identify the same things.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. You go through the process, you're hiring someone, and at least theoretically, it sounds simple, but what really should happen is you outline for someone what their role is and what their role is in the mission. And then once you hire them to do it, and again, this sounds very rudimentary, but you should be evaluating them on those same things that you told them you were going to hire them to do. But sometimes there can be a disconnect just as we get going with different evaluation systems and all that sorts of things. So did you find, or are you even a little bit more aware now of connecting those two, the role description and the scorecard coming in? And we'll talk to those in a minute. And then just how you're going to evaluate people eventually.
Definitely more aware of that and thinking about that. That's the next step in our
Yep.
process here, is going to be revamping our evaluation system. I'm going to be having a supervisors meeting in a couple of weeks to start that process and start really thinking about that and how we can make sure that we set those expectations when that employee came in. Here's what we expect of you, and making sure that they're evaluated based on those expectations. So we're working towards that, and that's the plan.
Excellent. I mean, this is
Yes.
fair to people. And sometimes a new supervisor comes in, a new manager is promoted or something, they may have a different idea. So just having those available. I did mention scorecards come out. Do you now, or do you plan to use a hiring scorecard?
Do use a hiring scorecard. It's been interesting trying to condition us, myself included, trying to condition us to use that during the process and have it there and be thinking about it. But we are using one and tweaking it as we go along in this process. And it's a good thing. It's just taken us a while to transition.
Absolutely. Great. You can really become at least I've the experience been, and maybe you can speak to this. It's possible to become enamored with a candidate because of all kinds of things, their personality, the way they communicate with people, and maybe miss some things. Or the opposite's true. The person maybe isn't jumping out at you, but when you get down to the job that needs to be done, they can be pretty good. Have you ever had that experience where you either overlook something due to the kind of personality of the person, or you think maybe miss something because something just didn't jump out?
Absolutely. And it's interesting, but the way we do the process, I sit in on every interview. I ask the questions. That gives the supervisor that's also in on the interview the opportunity to watch the person a little more closely and to look for certain cues and things and listen for things more than focusing on asking the questions. Yes, absolutely. I think we're learning to define things that have bearing on the role and focus on those things a little more by using that scorecard, looking at it and being in tune to it and focusing on all of that. So I think that's really helped. And yes, definitely, I've had many times that just from looking at the application and seeing the person come in, I'm like, okay, this is the one,
Yeah.
And then you
Yes.
sit down with them and they start talking and you start asking about their background. And I found this pattern in asking about the background. It really brings a pattern to things. People tend to tell you the same things over and over, and you learn their strengths and weaknesses from that. So that's been really interesting. And I've definitely had wow, I thought this was the person. Not so much.
Not it. Not it. Right. Yeah. And that's really the power with the scorecard where you've got it at least in front of you. And like you said, you touched on a real important point, just to listen. If you have a good scorecard, at least theoretically, if you have a good scorecard, you know what you're looking for. And then it's really incumbent then upon the applicant to communicate to you how they fit that scorecard. Sometimes we get that reversed, or I know I've been in cases or talked to people in cases where you are making the case for the person because they can't do it and you want to hire them. And, but just the ability to be quiet and listen. And we talked about that in the training too. So excellent. Just a couple more things here. We have a saying around Floyd, people are people and people are going to people. I'm sure in your time, you've seen a lot in the HR part. And the other thing I've come to understand is that in the HR department, the problems are very rarely with the R. It's always the H, right? The human. So just thinking about that, what are some things that have just been constant from your 30 years that are just have been constant in HR from day one, haven't changed based on different generations and those things?
In regard to people, I feel like people want to feel welcome and comfortable in their environment. Doesn't matter. They want to feel that. They need to feel that comfort and that they're welcome there and that they have a place and that they're appreciated and acknowledged in what they've done, whether that's a small contribution or a large contribution. Everybody wants to have that feeling. They've got a place here and they feel good about it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the constants I think I've seen,
Gotcha.
whether it's young or older applicants, everybody feels that.
Yep, absolutely. And this was a perfect example of your place. We also know that the cold hard fact is that people work for a company, not for the company or its mission. It's part of it, but people work for a company, but by working there, they're going to be able to accomplish their dreams. It's whatever those dreams are. And I really saw that when I was at your place, the ability to do that. You provide people almost a limitless slate for them. If someone starts working at PTCI and they have a chance to live out their dreams in their lives, both personally and professionally, because you do, I did notice in talking to people, it is possible because we talk about hiring, we often think about the external candidate, but you do a lot of internal promotion. And could you speak to that just for a moment? What's the hiring look like internally?
Absolutely. Sometimes we will open a position only in-house if it's something that's a little more skilled and we feel like we really need to hire someone that kind of already knows those skills and that background. We'll open it only in-house. For the most part, we open positions inside and out. always giving first priority to our current employees. We
Okay.
feel like growth for them is absolutely necessary. If at all we can, we will hire from within. That's our first priority.
Awesome. To carry on that question we were talking about, so what's been constant? Everybody wants to talk. I mean, I feel like I'm old, so
I
current
realize it.
generation, these young people, and everything. What's different today in hiring than say different times?
Sure. People still need people. I feel like they do. But in some
Okay.
ways, I think they learn to be comfortable with limited contact, texting
Interesting.
instead of talking, social media, all of those things. I don't feel the warmth sometimes from
Mm,
the applicants. I feel like it's harder for me to give them work because they're more reserved. I feel a lot more of that. I think it comes from just not having people contact like they
right.
used to have. So it's a lot of work on our part when we get them first
Yeah.
sat down and started to relax and get them to realize we're just here to have a conversation
Sure.
about your background and what you can bring to the table and what we can bring to you. So
Yep.
I think that's become more difficult.
Yeah, we're so much more transactional, aren't we? And then you scroll to the next thing and
Absolutely.
and go from there. One last thing, do you feel like implementing some of the things you have is actually going to, although you don't have a lot of it, when it comes time to, we've talked about evaluating, but ultimately not everything works out. And so by having a real disciplined hiring process, do you feel like it can help reduce those situations when you have to part ways, or at least make it clear to everybody because you set standards in hiring?
Absolutely. Setting expectations are key in all areas of HR. I feel like you really got to
Yeah.
have expectations for people. They can't meet their potential if they don't know what you expect them to do. So I think setting those expectations in that hiring process and letting them know from start to finish, from the time they sit down with you to interview until they're brought on board and they're going through your onboarding process, you have to set those expectations and they have to understand. So having come up with through our training with you all, having that come up with a much more clear process and now starting to work on a clear, more expectations based evaluation
Yep.
is going to be awesome for us. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Like I said, you guys are killing it. The company's doing well year after year. They keep producing well. It's a place where people really want to come to work and know that they can accomplish their dreams by working there. And believe me, I get to a lot of places and it was great being there. And I can definitely tell that you're doing the right things and you're a big part of that. Congratulations on that. And again, thanks, Mitzi, for taking the time to talk and sharing your wisdom today. I'm sure a lot of folks out there are going to sometimes just be reaffirmed. I'm on the right track or I need to get on the right track hiring wise. So thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot from you and I'm glad that you learned a few things along the way. Again, Mitzi Dain from PTCI in Oklahoma. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thanks again. Thanks, Mitzi.
Bye. See ya.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some takeaways as you are strengthening your hiring process. And if you are interested in learning more about culture coaching, which really means that you're working with a coach to help you build a dynamic culture so that you can have more engaged team members, so that people enjoy coming to work and accomplishing great things together, then we want to talk to you. We would love to have a conversation about where you are in your culture right now and how one of our coaches can really help you thrive, especially using those 6 immutable principles of a dynamic culture that Matthew lays out so beautifully in the book, The Culture Solution. So if you're interested at all in having that conversation, we would love to talk to you. You can go to floydcoaching.com and someone from our team will reach out to you. Thank you again for listening to this episode. We hope you are enjoying these episodes. And more importantly, we hope that you not only enjoy listening, but that every single time you listen, there's something that you're taking away and you're starting to apply it into your business to help your team and to help you grow. So thanks again for listening. We really appreciate you. Until next time, lead with culture.